friends, welcome to Wednesday. Today I'm going to read you the next section of Nuts to You. When we left off, Jed had escaped the hawk and found some nice new squirrels who found him a nest and wanted to go home there, and he's not sure what he's going to do because while they're very nice, he really wants to get home to his family, but he doesn't actually know how to get there. So this chapter is called As the Hawk Flies, As the Squirrel Travels. The friends Jed missed so much had set off many hours ago. They were swift runners. While the buzz paths, remember those are the telephone lines, dipped and rose, the direction they traveled was straight and true. Over the years, the branches of nearby trees had grown close to the buzz paths. They interlaced and intertwined. In some places, they rested right on top of one another. When this happened, Chai and Titi had to take a few steps off the path until it was clear again. No problem. It was a good thing, actually. It kept things interesting, kept them alert. On they ran, stepping off the paths when they had to, but always moving forward. Now and again, whoever had been behind for a while would spring around and get in front. This looked like a game, but it was also a way of taking turns being the squirrel who would bear the brunt of the wind. That takes more energy, and it's only fair to take turns. That's why geese fly in V's. That's why bicycle riders ride in lanes. It's called drafting. While they were running and stepping off and drafting, Chai had the idea that he would go around for his turn in front, but that he would go around in a wider circle so that Titi wouldn't see him. Then she would be totally surprised when he appeared on the path in front of her. And she was. The look on her face made Chai bust out laughing. Titi laughed too, and then she said to herself, "Two squirrels can play at that game." She waited a little while, just followed behind, bided her time, made comments about the scenery, watched for the right branch. When she saw it, she scampered, not to one side or the other, but straight up. She smiled as she passed directly over Chai. She stifled a snort of laughter as she saw him glance both ways to see if he was coming around. With as much stealth and speed as she could muster, she bolted far forward and scrambled back down. She sat down on a branch just over the path and worked to slow her breathing to its normal rate. She pretended to be examining her paw. "Oh, there you are," she said when Chai appeared. "Did you stop for a nap or what?" Chai pulled up short at the sound of her voice. He looked at her, his brow furrowed, his mouth open, but only for a second. "Okay then," he said, and in a blur of fur he shot past her. She grinned and flew off after him. This was a race now. Squirrel nature took over. Above and below, right and left, on the path, then off. They laughed with joy as they sailed from one slim, shapely branch to a perfect bounce, landing onto the top of another really great branch, which often led to another really great branch, which led, of course, to another really, really great branch, which led, of course, to another really, really great branch. Sometimes Chai was ahead, sometimes Titi. It didn't really matter, except that it did matter. It mattered just enough to the both of them that they ran as fast as they could and as far as they could. Neither one noticed that at some point, and it was pretty early on, they stepped off the buzz paths completely and didn't step back on. They ran in some new direction, a bunch of new directions. They weren't thinking about directions at all. They were free running. They ran and they ran until an especially demanding leap took the breath right out of them. They slowed, huffing and puffing to a stop. "Best race ever," said Titi, gasping for air. "I think you won, though." "No, you won," said Chai, leaning against a mighty trunk, "but only because I let you." "Like fun," said Titi. "My shin splints are the only reason you could even keep up." "Yeah, right," said Chai, "if that's what makes you feel better." At that moment a nut fell from above right into his paws. They looked at each other and laughed. "Lunch," said Titi. Chai squinted up at the sun. "It might be closer to dinner," he said. He turned around to try to figure out where they were, and then he realized where they weren't. "Titi," he began tentatively, but Titi had realized it too. "What fools are we? What kind of friends?" They climbed to the top to see. They climbed to the treetops to see what they could see. What they saw was more treetops that glowed green and gold and persimmon in the late afternoon sunlight. They rippled in every direction, a sunlit bumpy surface, beautiful but confusing because everything looked the same. "Stupid, stupid," said Chai. "Will you stop now?" said Titi. "Okay, but what do we do now?" "Right," said Chai. "Okay. Wait, look over there." He pointed and Titi looked. In the distance he could barely make out the top of a silver egg. The great beak, the line of frozen spider webs. Remember that the frozen spider webs are actually the telephone poles. They were tinier than usual and arranged differently, and it took a minute or two for Chai and TT to figure out that this was because they had traveled sideways and backwards and slantwise, and they ended up in who knows where. Nuts, said TT. I can't believe we ran that far. It didn't seem like we were racing for that long. I can't believe we have to run back, said Chai. What were we thinking, said TT. Yeah, said Chai. Well, let's go then. Doggedly they made their way. Over and over they had to climb up and high to check their bearings. When they wearily stepped back into the buzz path, dusk was falling. It was all they could do to set one paw in front of the other. Still they plodded on. The cooling darkness seemed to thicken around them, slowing them down. Their tired muscles told them it was time to stop, find a nest, curl up, go to sleep, but they went on. There were no games now, just chatter. Moving and moving, just barely still moving. And when they had almost forgotten what they were looking for, there it was. The third, they hoped, frozen spider web. Big, stiff, cold. You would not want to meet the spider who made that web. TT and Chai scrambled swiftly down the rigid framework. Nearing the bottom, they paused on one of the web's thick crosswire strands. They looked into the spicy smelling darkness around them and listened to the sounds that might be perfectly normal, but then again, might not be. TT shivered. Who knew what was out there? Let's just build it here, she said. Where? asked Chai. Here, in the web, look. There's the crotch. She pointed to a corner made by several strands coming together. Chai looked at it and then down toward the ground. Okay, he said. I guess we're up high enough. They set to work, willing themselves to make trip after trip to the bottom and back, foraging in the brush for enough dried grass, leaves, bits of bark and twigs to make a dry leaf nest. It was the sloppiest dray ever, but it would have to do. Exhausted, they crawled inside. As TT lay under the fluff of her tail, the miles that they had traveled reeled in her mind. It was possible, she realized, for Jed to have traveled just as many, in any direction at all. But she was too tired to think about that. She would think about that tomorrow. Chai had thought about it a long time ago. He had thought it first thing. But TT's enthusiasm was contagious. He had let himself grow hopeful. Now, though, it was time to be realistic. To face the facts. In the morning he would persuade TT to turn back. It was a shame, but there it was. In truth, it would be more of a shame than he realized, because if it had occurred to Chai to shout just then, into the quiet night, if he had just found the energy to do it, Jed would have heard him. Faintly, but he would have heard. That's how close they all were, but no one shouted, no one heard, and no one knew. So they were actually really close to Jed, but none of them knew. Chapter 7, Dreams. Jed dreamed that he could not find the nuts. He was sure he knew right where they were. He could smell the nutty goodness wafting up through the soil, but time after time he dug and he dug and he dug to find nothing. And he dreamed that he was scampering along a buzz path and suddenly realized he had no tail to give him balance. His tail was gone. He fell through the air. He could not right himself. And then there were dreams of being snatched up by a hawk, the tightness of the hawk's grip, Jed's legs and tail dangling, the dizzying ascent, the rushing air. These dreams had a scary actuary now that he actually knew what this was like. Jed's muscles twitched as he dreamed of digging, scampering, falling, dangling. He would jump with a start just before hitting the ground. His eyes open, his heart and mind racing, he crouched, trembled, peered into the dark, sniffed, then remembered what had happened and where he was. He made himself curl up once more. He tried to think happy thoughts as he fell asleep. But tonight, the only thoughts he had the thoughts that had always made him feel happy before, only made him feel sad and alone. Chapter 8. Squirrel in the blink of an eye. Squirrels slumbered in a warm nest of dried grass, but their piece of the world was tilting toward winter, and the air outside turned icy. Filmy dew stiffened into frost around each leaf and twig. When the sun rose, the frozen crystals sparkled like a million diamonds, but only for a moment. Sunlight melted the diamonds into water, and the frosty air lost its bite. The autumn leaves glowed golden. Around the grove, creatures of the night grew drowsy, blinked, and then closed their eyes. The creatures of the day woke up, feeling a little hungry, and called out to one another. As Jed awoke, his dreams evaporated. They left behind a sticky feeling, but he willed it to stay. He counted his blessings on his fingers. Not eaten by a hawk. Landed in a foreign but friendly country. There is food. He had 2 fingers left, but that was enough, he figured, for starters. There was a chattering close by, and Jed listened, getting his ears used to the reddish accent before jumping into the day. He soon realized that they were talking about him. Anyone as can escape from a hawk. Well, there's the thing. I have not heard it before, said a high and scratchy voice. Are you thinking it's true, then? Said another lower voice. Well, if it isn't, maybe he should be king or something, said the first. Teller of tales, maybe, said the second. King or something like that, said the high voice. Governor, maybe, or a hero. Being lucky don't make you a hero. It does, if you ask me. Luck is catchy. Nobody asked you, though, did they? The voices moved out of Jed's hearing, and he smiled. It was going to be an interesting day. He took a deep breath, stepped outside, and looked around, and thought for just an instant that he saw 2 gray squirrels through the gap between branches. Not any 2 gray squirrels, but his best friends, Chai and Titi. He blinked his eyes. He rubbed them with his paws. When he looked again, sure enough, the gray squirrels were gone. His imagination. I didn't know I was such a sap, he said to himself. Before he could think about it further, 3 reddish squirrels joined him on his limb. They wanted to hear the story of how he escaped from the hawk. Tell us about the wolf, said a squirrel called Pooft. There was no wolf, said Sam. Just tell it then, said Pooft, how you escaped and all. But first, the snatching bit. The snatching bit is the start of it. They settled themselves into the nearby branches to listen. It's nice when somebody wants to hear your story, especially when you are in a strange new place, as Jed told it. As Jed told it, more of the reddish squirrel grew close. Some of them shouted prompts when they thought he might be leaving something out. Maybe it was just because they were sitting so still, mostly, that they heard a rumbling sound started up in the distance. It was an unnatural sound which rose and fell. Jed paused, and they all listened. Maybe it's all us here, said Chuck, and we don't pay it no mind. As they listened for a moment more, no one could identify it. They decided it was too far away to worry about. Tell us the escaping part, said Sam. That's the best part. Teach us the secret trick, said Pooft. The escaping from hawks trick. It wasn't a trick really, Jed told them. It was remembering everything I knew about hawks. It was trying to stay calm and focused. We'll hear the rest of his story tomorrow.